When you, like, when you walk into an old-growth forest, right?
Right.
The architecture of life is just so obvious.
Oh, absolutely.
You see the massive trunks, the towering canopy, the complex root systems physically gripping the soil. It's undeniably this living, breathing, biological engine.
Well, the scale of a terrestrial ecosystem basically demands your attention,
Hmm.
It's entirely visible, towering right in front of you.
Right, but then you stand on a beach looking out of the ocean, and it mostly just looks like a flat expanse of blue.
Just water, yeah. Maybe some white caps.
Yeah. Unless a dolphin breaches or something, it looks completely devoid of that physical architecture.
Right.
Beneath that surface, though, is an ecological engine that arguably works harder and produces more than any terrestrial forest on Earth.
It really does.
So today, you and I are going to unpack exactly how that hidden engine is quietly running our planet. We have a massive stack of sources today.
We really do. It's a fascinating mix.
Yeah, we've got dense marine biology textbooks, global nutritional guides, academic papers on biomedical applications, and some really incredible on-the-ground reporting about indigenous biocultural restoration.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But our mission is to uncover the unsung heroes of the ocean, which are marine plants and algae.
Right.
We're going to figure out how these organisms are sitting right there in your pantry and how they might offer the literal keys to our medical and climate futures. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's get it.
Looking at the botanical definitions in our sources, marine plants is actually a pretty wide umbrella, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The terminology easily trips people up. We're essentially looking at three distinct groups operating in the coastal zones.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the complex submergent plants, like seagrasses, which live their entire life cycles completely underwater.
Right, so fully submerged.
Exactly. Then, emergent plants. These are things like mangroves and salt-tolerant coastal grasses.
So they sort of stick out of the water.
Yeah, they have their base in the saltwater but rise up into the air. And finally, the macroalgae, which everyone casually calls seaweed.
Seaweed, right.
But seaweeds aren't true plants, they are protists, categorized by their photosynthetic pigments into green, brown, and red algae.
I noticed in the biology text that comparing a giant piece of kelp to a terrestrial tree is a false equivalence.
Oh, entirely.
Like, a tree relies on a massive underground root system to pull water and nutrients from the soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
But seaweeds don't have roots or stems or leaves.
Right, they have holdfasts, stipes, and blades.
Yeah, and that holdfast doesn't absorb a single nutrient. It's essentially a rock climber's grappling hook.
That's a great way to put it.
It just grips onto a rock or a shell with industrial-level epoxy strength, purely to keep the algae from getting shredded and washed away by tidal forces.
Because the ocean is brutal.
Exactly. The blades just absorb everything they need directly from the water column.
Which perfectly illustrates how these organisms are engineered for high-energy environments, Before we even touch on human applications, their mechanical function in the ocean is just staggering. Take the submergent seagrasses.
The ones fully underwater.
Right. They don't just sit there. They actively alter the physical geography of the coastline. Their root systems interlock beneath the sand, which massively increases the sheer strength of the sediment.
So they're acting like a subterranean net.
Precisely. They physically lock the ocean floor in place. This reduces water turbidity, keeping the water crystal clear for other photosynthetic life.
Oh, wow.
And it creates this amazing kinetic dampening effect. During a hurricane, a healthy seagrass meadow acts as a hydrodynamic shock absorber.
Wait, really? It absorbs the storm.
Yeah, it physically drags on the water, sapping the kinetic energy from a storm surge before it can violently slam into the coastline.
The structural engineering of it is wild. But then the sources pivot to the microscopic side.
The phytoplankton.
Yes, phytoplankton. These tiny, single-celled floating algae. The sources say they're responsible for roughly 50% of the Earth's primary production in oxygen.
That's right, half the oxygen.
Every second breath you take is manufactured by invisible ocean protists. It's crazy.
It really is.
I have to ask, though, if phytoplankton are doing all the heavy lifting for global oxygen, why do marine biologists obsess over saving the big, leafy kelp forests?
That's a really good question.
I mean, why does the macroalgae matter if the microalgae are the actual lungs of the planet?
Well, phytoplankton provide the biochemical life support, sure, but macroalgae provide the physical
The
metropolis.
metropolis.
Yeah. Kelp forests, which routinely grow up to 100 feet tall, create a three-dimensional architecture in an otherwise open, vulnerable water column.
Because open water is dangerous.
Extremely. They are the essential nursery habitats of the ocean. A juvenile fish in open water is immediate prey.
Right, nowhere to hide.
Exactly. Kelp forests offer a dense, complex labyrinth for young fish and invertebrates to hide in, mature, and breed.
So their foundation.
Completely. Remove the kelp and you instantly remove the foundational shelter that the entire marine trophic pyramid rests on.
And speaking of that pyramid, reading the Food and Agriculture Organization data in our stack, that trophic pyramid is in serious trouble.
It's looking pretty grim, yeah.
The global marine fish harvest has essentially hit a brick wall. We're maxing out what we can pull in terms of wild fish without triggering a total population collapse.
The oceans are overfished, plain and simple.
Right. And the geopolitics of feeding a growing planet suggests we have to move down that pyramid. We have to start harvesting the marine macrophytes, the seaweeds, directly.
Instead of just eating the apex predators that rely on them,
Exactly.
the energetic transfer from plants to herbivores to carnivores is incredibly inefficient. By the time you eat wild salmon, you are capturing a tiny fraction of the original solar energy converted by the algae at the bottom of the food web.
So you lose energy at every step.
Massive amounts of it. Harvesting the algae directly bypasses that massive energy loss.
And looking at the nutritional guides, we should absolutely want to bypass it. These are literal seaside superfoods.
Oh, their nutritional profiles are amazing.
Take Dulce, right. It's a red seaweed from the North Atlantic. It is a phenomenal high-protein vegan alternative. Or kombu, which is a brown kelp.
Kombu is great.
I was fascinated to learn that kombu naturally contains glutamic acid. If you cook meat with kombu, the glutamic acid chemically breaks down the peptide bonds in the meat.
It physically unwinds the proteins.
Yeah, it tenderizes it while making it more digestible.
And beyond the culinary chemistry, there is the mineral aspect. Terrestrial soils are often heavily depleted of trace minerals due to overfarming.
Right, the soil is dead.
Yeah. But seaweeds spend their entire lives soaking in a constantly circulating marine mineral bath. They bioaccumulate heavy concentrations of iodine and tyrosine.
Which are the exact required building blocks for human thyroid hormones.
Exactly.
And your thyroid dictates your entire metabolic rate and heavily influences mood regulation.
It's vital. And then there are the omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. We are marketed this idea that we must eat fish for brain health, right?
Right, fish oil pills and all that.
Well, the fish don't synthesize those omega-3s.
Wait, they don't?
No. DHA, which is highly concentrated in human brain and retinal tissue, and is critical for staving off cognitive decline, is originally synthesized by marine algae.
Oh, wow. So the fish just eat the algae.
Yeah, the fish just accumulated in their fat stores by eating lower on the food chain.
That makes total sense.
Going straight to the source provides the same neuroprotective benefits while also delivering complex marine fibers that selectively feed beneficial bacteria in the human gut microbiome.
I completely understand the ecological and nutritional logic here, but I have a hard time believing we're going to convince a massive meat and potatoes population to suddenly start chewing on raw, rubbery kelp.
People are definitely hesitant.
Even with the popularity of sushi, it feels like a monumental dietary shift to ask of people.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the reality is most people are already consuming massive amounts of seaweed without ever knowing it.
Really?
25% of the global seaweed harvest, which is roughly 900,000 tons of wet biomass annually, is diverted entirely into industrial extraction.
Wait, extraction for what?
We harvest them to extract structural polysaccharides known as phycocolloids.
Phycocolloids. That sounds incredibly sci-fi.
It does, but it's everywhere.
Yeah, the sources call this the invisible scaffolding holding up the modern grocery store. We are talking about the big three extracts, right?
Right.
Elgin from brown seaweed and agar and carrageenan from red seaweeds.
Right. Think about the high-energy tidal zone we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
To survive getting pounded by relentless waves, seaweed can't be rigid like an oak tree or it would snap.
Obviously.
It has to be highly flexible yet fiercely resilient. It achieves this using these specific gelatinous chemicals, which act like microscopic shock absorbers within the cellular walls.
And we take those exact shock-absorbing chemicals and inject them into our daily lives.
All the time.
If you've eaten ice cream, you've consumed seaweed extract. Algin is what stops giant, crunchy ice crystals from forming as the ice cream freezes and thaws in transit.
Nobody wants crunchy ice cream.
Right. And carrageenan acts like a microscopic sponge inside your chocolate milk. It creates a suspension matrix that traps the cocoa particles so gravity can't pull them to the bottom of the carton.
It keeps it perfectly mixed.
It's also what stabilizes your toothpaste, preventing it from separating into a puddle of water and chalky paste on your bathroom counter.
Agar is even used to manufacture the adhesive on the back of postage stamps.
Thamps. It's everywhere.
The chemical properties of these marine extracts are so highly specialized that finding synthetic alternatives is often economically or functionally impossible.
Wow.
And the applications are moving rapidly from stabilizing our food to replacing our packaging. We are entering the era of marine bioplastics.
I was reading about this extraction process, and the manufacturing is incredibly clever. You take the cellulosic material from the seaweed, run it through a hot extraction process, and then clarify it.
Yes. The chemistry relies on manipulating the molecular chains. Seaweed fibers naturally form a loose, tangled net.
Right?
To turn that net into a rigid plastic, you have to lock those fibers tightly together.
Right.
Manufacturers use potassium chloride, which essentially acts like microscopic zip ties.
The zip ties.
Yeah, snapping the molecular structure tight into a solid matrix. Then they precipitate that concentrated solution using isopropyl alcohol, resulting in a marine-derived plastic that biodegrades naturally.
Biodegradable plastic sounds amazing. But here is my pushback on this, though.
Let's hear it.
I have been reading headlines about the bioplastic revolution for, like, over a decade. If we have the technology to make biodegradable plastics out of kelp, completely bypassing the petroleum industry,
Yeah.
why is my local grocery store still a sea of single-use petroleum plastic? What is the actual bottleneck here?
It inevitably comes down to the economies of scale. Currently, fermentative bioplastic production is roughly twice as expensive as petroleum-based polyethylene.
Twice as expensive.
Right. The fossil fuel industry has a century-long head start on supply chain efficiency. When crude oil is cheap, marine bioplastics simply cannot compete on a per-unit cost for low-margin items like water bottles.
So it's entirely an economic waiting game.
A game that is beginning to shift, though.
How so?
Major industrial players, like Toyota, are heavily investing in seaweed-based bioplastics.
Car companies?
Yes. They aren't trying to make cheap water bottles. They are developing marine-based alternatives to replace the highly expensive petroleum-derived carbon fiber used in automotive bodywork.
Oh, that makes sense. High-margin stuff.
Exactly. Once a massive global industry scales up the manufacturing infrastructure for high-end applications, the baseline cost of marine bioplastics will plummet, eventually making it viable for everyday packaging.
The structural resilience of marine plants is giving us food stabilizers and car parts. That's crazy.
It's just the beginning.
Yeah, because the biomedical papers in our stack reveal something even more profound. The evolutionary pressure of the ocean has forced algae to synthesize complex chemical compounds that human scientists literally cannot build from scratch in a laboratory.
The ocean is a theater of extreme chemical warfare.
Right.
Algae produce what biologists call secondary or non-primary metabolites.
What does that mean?
These aren't chemicals used for basic photosynthesis or reproduction. They are purely defense mechanisms.
Okay.
An algae in a tidal zone might spend 6 hours submerged in freezing bacteria-rich seawater, right?
Yeah.
And the next 6 hours baking under direct, intense ultraviolet radiation at low tide.
To survive that extreme shift, they've evolved compounds that are now saving human lives.
We absolutely are.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The standout example from the literature is Aracy, or arabinosyl cytosine. It was originally isolated from a Caribbean marine sponge.
Which shares a close symbiotic relationship with surrounding marine microbes and algae.
Right. And Aracy revolutionized the treatment of acute myelocytic leukemia.
The mechanism behind Aracy is brilliant. It acts as a biological Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse?
The compound chemically mimics cytosine, which is one of the 4 main building blocks of DNA.
Okay, I'm with you.
When a rapidly dividing leukemia cell tries to replicate its DNA, it absorbs the Aracy, mistaking it for normal cytosine.
But it's a structural fake.
Exactly. Once incorporated, the Aracy physically jams the DNA replication machinery.
Oh, wow.
The cancer cell cannot complete its division and undergoes apoptosis, or programmed cell death.
So it tricks it into destroying itself.
We are leveraging the chemical camouflage evolved by a marine sponge to trick human cancer cells into destroying themselves.
That is staggering. And we are seeing similar breakthroughs in dermatology and physical medicine, too.
Oh, yes.
Extracts from macroalgae are proving highly effective against Staphylococcus epidermidis, which is the bacteria largely responsible for severe acne.
Which is huge.
Right. In an era where antibiotic resistance is a looming global crisis, we are tapping into marine extracts that these bacteria have no evolutionary defense against.
We also utilize their physical properties in medical environments. Those alginates we discussed earlier, stabilizing toothpaste.
Yeah, the invisible sponges.
Right. They are highly hydrophilic, meaning they aggressively attract and hold water.
Okay.
In trauma centers, alginate-based wound dressings are applied to severe burns. They form a thick, protective gel that traps moisture and localized immune cells right against the burn tissue.
That sounds soothing.
It radically accelerates the healing process while preventing the dressing from adhering to the raw nerve endings.
Which would be agonizing to remove.
Nah.
There are even literal seaweed capsules developed for weight management that safely expand once they hit the water in your stomach.
Yeah, acting as a non-surgical gastric band to trigger satiety signals.
The ocean is effectively a deep-sea apothecary. But the overarching theme of our sources implies a heavy caveat here.
It does.
Just as these marine plants have the capacity to heal human bodies, they have the capacity to heal our rapidly changing planet. But only if we transition from simply extracting them to actively stewarding them.
Right. The climate mechanism here is known as blue carbon.
Blue carbon.
Yeah. When we discuss carbon sequestration, the public imagination immediately goes to planting terrestrial trees.
Of course, plant a tree to save the Earth.
Yet, macroalgae sequester an estimated 173 million metric tons of carbon annually.
That's a massive number.
It is. As kelp fronds naturally break off in rough water, they drift offshore and sink into the abyssal zones of the deep ocean.
Because they don't just float forever.
Right. And because the deep sea lacks the oxygen and bacteria required to rapidly decompose the biomass, that carbon is effectively locked away in the sediment for centuries.
Direct buffering against atmospheric warming and ocean acidification.
Exactly.
There's also the immediate agricultural application. The research shows that supplementing cattle feed with specific strains of red seaweed can reduce the methane emissions from feedlots by up to 99%.
99%. It's almost hard to believe.
How does that even work?
The seaweed contains compounds that actively inhibit the specific enzymes used by microbes in the cow's rumen.
So it stops the gas at the source.
Right. It fundamentally alters their gut chemistry during digestion to prevent methane production.
A 99% reduction from a slight dietary tweak is a massive climate lever.
A game changer.
But I want to lean into the human element of this stewardship, because the sources dedicate significant ink to indigenous biocultural restoration.
It's a crucial part of the story.
This isn't just a clinical exercise in planting kelp to fix carbon grafts. It is about repairing severed cultural arteries.
Yeah.
In Hawaii, a group called Limuhui is actively restoring traditional Limu kohu algae. Due to coastal development and environmental degradation, entire younger generations grew up without access to the culinary or spiritual practices surrounding this algae.
They lost that connection.
Yeah. So Limuhui is cultivating it in onshore tanks and replanting the shorelines, allowing that ancestral knowledge to flow again.
Similarly, in Alaska, Dune Lankard's Native Conservancy is utilizing sugar kelp and bull kelp to build a regenerative economy.
Regenerative, meaning not just extraction.
Right. They're seeding test farms not for sheer industrial extraction, but to create stable, localized jobs that keep coastal communities intact.
While simultaneously restoring the complex marine canopy required for wild salmon and herring populations to rebound.
Exactly. It's holistic.
Now, I have to admit, reading the reporting on the Haida Gwaii restoration project in Canada really challenged my perspective.
The urchin culling.
Yeah. The Haida Nation is undertaking a massive kelp restoration effort. But their methodology involves indigenous divers going underwater with hammers and systematically smashing thousands of sea urchins.
It sounds brutal on the surface.
It does. If sea urchins are naturally occurring marine life, sending divers down to smash them feels like human interference. Why are we violently culling one native species to save another?
Well, it requires looking at the historical baseline of the ecosystem. The current state of the coastal ocean is not natural, you know.
What do you mean?
It is the result of a cascading ecological collapse triggered by humans centuries ago. During the maritime fur trade, hunters almost entirely eradicated the sea otter populations along the Pacific coast.
And sea otters are the primary apex predator of the sea urchin.
Yes. Without the otters to prey on them, urchin populations exploded exponentially.
So they just took over.
Urchins graze heavily on the holdfasts of kelp. This unprecedented overpopulation allowed them to mow down entire underwater forests.
Wow.
It created these desolate ecological dead zones known as urchin barrens.
The reporting actually noted that the urchins in these barrens are in a state of starvation.
They are. Once the kelp is gone, the urchins enter this zombie-like metabolic state.
Zombie urchins.
Yeah, their reproductive organs, the uni or roe that is traditionally harvested as food, are completely shriveled and empty.
Because there's nothing left to eat.
Right. They just march across the barren rock, consuming any new kelp spore before it can sprout.
So they prevent the forest from ever growing back.
Exactly. By actively smashing the urchins, humans are not unnaturally interfering. They are deliberately stepping back into the ecological void left by the eradicated sea otters.
They are playing the role of the apex predator.
Precisely.
And the data shows it works rapidly. As soon as the artificial urchin density is cleared, the kelp canopy bounces back.
Almost immediately.
And with it, the traditional food webs return to the coast. The abalone, the healthy urchins, the herring spawn.
It all comes back.
It's a profound realization that humans can be a keystone species for healing rather than just destruction.
Absolutely.
So let's synthesize the journey of this deep dive. We started by looking at a deceptively empty ocean surface and uncovered the biological engine running beneath it.
We did.
We mapped out how the hydrodynamic architecture of seagrasses physically protects our coastlines.
Right.
We explored the trophic pyramid, the glutamic acid and seaside superfoods, and how the invisible phycocolloids holding up the kelp are the exact same microscopic sponges holding up the ice cream in your freezer.
It's all connected.
Yeah. We looked at the Trojan horse mechanism of Aris Sea treating leukemia, the deep-sea carbon sink of blue carbon, and how indigenous communities are restoring balance by stepping back into their ancestral ecological roles.
The overarching narrative here is one of profound invisible interconnectedness, The chemical and structural realities of marine plants permeate almost every facet of modern human survival.
They really do. But before we wrap, our sources contain one final vital caveat.
A word of warning.
Yeah. We have spent this entire deep dive marveling at the biochemical miracles of marine algae. But the ocean is not a domesticated garden. Nature's ultimate super tool demands absolute respect.
It's not completely harmless.
No. When massive algal blooms wash ashore and begin to decompose, the rotting biomass produces hydrogen sulfide gas.
Which is very dangerous.
Yeah, this is a highly toxic, corrosive compound capable of causing severe respiratory distress and neurological poisoning in coastal populations.
The chemical defense mechanisms we praised earlier can also be directly hostile to humans.
Right.
There is a specific cyanobacterium, often casually grouped with seaweeds, called Microcoleus lingbiaceus. It's widely known as stinging seaweed.
Stinging seaweed. That sounds awful.
Direct physical contact with its chemical secretions causes a severe blistering dermatitis that can persist for weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is a harsh biological reminder that these organisms evolved to survive in a brutal environment, not to cater to us.
They're a double-edged sword. The ocean is a pharmacy and a pantry, but it is fundamentally a wild, powerful, and potentially dangerous ecosystem.
Unquestionably.
So the next time you find yourself standing on a beach looking out at that giant, flat expanse of blue water, I hope you don't just see an empty surface.
Look a little deeper.
Yeah. I hope you see the invisible forest, the holdfasts gripping the rocks with epoxy strength, the towering canopy creating a three-dimensional metropolis.
The invisible biochemical engine quietly driving the atmosphere of the world.
A structural and chemical architecture as complex and vital as anything on dry land. Thank you for taking the deep dive with us.
It's been great.
We'll see you next time.